Record, please.
Yeah, all done.
Awesome. So, hello. This is an introduction to EndNote session. So welcome. But before we do start, I want to do an acknowledgement to country. So I acknowledge that Murdoch University is situated on the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people. I pay respect to their enduring and dynamic culture and the leadership of the Noongar elders, both past and present. The Bourja country on which Murdoch University is located has for thousands of years been a place of learning. So we at Murdoch are proud to continue this long tradition. So at the basic introduction to EndNote session webinar today, my name is Tamara Kappa. I'll be presenting, and I've got a co-presenter, Kelly Rogerson, who will be actually throughout the session answering some of the questions that come through the chat. But before we do begin, I want to do some housekeeping rules. So you will be on mute with the video turned off during the session. And if you do have a question, please use the chat. And I've put a little picture there so you know how to prompt that chat out, so you know where the box is. And you will not be expected to follow along during the session. So this session is just an introduction to EndNote to allow you to understand how EndNote works through the live demonstration. You will have a chance to ask questions at different parts of the session. And this session is also being recorded, and it will be made available afterwards if you do have any issues with your Wi-Fi, sound, or picture during the session. So don't worry, that will be available afterwards if you do have any of those technical issues. So a bit of a session outline today of what we're going to be covering. So we're going to look at what is EndNote, adding references into EndNote, and EndNote in Word, and then also what EndNote support is available at Murdoch Library. So first of all, to get started, what is EndNote? So you might have heard the word EndNote a whole lot of places before, and your supervisor or unit coordinator might have mentioned this at some stage. So really, EndNote is a citation software management system. It helps you to manage your references. It can help you add citations into Word documents, add bibliographies into Word documents, and format them in the appropriate style. So here at Murdoch University, we actually have a license to EndNote, which allows you to download a copy onto your own device for your research and study, which you can actually find on our EndNote guide. So I'm just going to show you quickly what the EndNote guide looks like. And on this guide, down here is where you would be downloading your EndNote. So there are lots of different referencing softwares, but here at Murdoch, we use EndNote rather than Zotero or other referencing software management systems. So one thing to note though is that EndNote will not teach you how to reference properly. You actually have to know what referencing style you're using, and before you use any citation manager, you need to understand how it works, because otherwise what you put into EndNote, it might look like it's putting out some referencing, but if you don't understand referencing styles and how to reference properly, the reference that you get through EndNote might not look the way you want it to. So you do need to understand how to reference correctly, because it won't do that for you, but it definitely does help. So to get out of this PowerPoint and into the demonstration, we're going to take a look at how you would create your own EndNote library. So the first time you use EndNote, you're going to see a blank screen like this once downloaded. And to get started, you actually need to create a library. So to create a library, we go up to File here, and we're creating a new library. So we now need to select a location and give it a file name. I'm going to save this into Documents, and I want to make sure that I give it also a notable file name, something that I'm going to remember. So I might say this is Tamara's EndNote library. And save it into Documents. And one thing also that's really important is that you do not save it on a USB drive or a cloud drive such as Dropbox iCloud, because they're fine to store your backups, but not your working libraries. We've had sometimes people save it onto your USB drive, and what happens is they have some issues later on because it doesn't seem to handle being on a cloud as well. So just a note, do save it onto your actual device. You can save the backups onto your USB drive, but not for your whole library. So I'm going to save that now, and I've given it my unique file name, and I'm clicking save. And now what's going to happen is I'm going to pull up the library here, and this is what the start of your EndNote library. So one thing also which is a bit interesting about EndNote is that if I go into documents where I saved it, EndNote actually creates two files with the same name. So you can see a file here and you can see a file here. So it creates an ENL file here and a data file here, and both files need to always remain in the same location for EndNote to work correctly. So these two actually hold hands, and make sure that you do keep all your references together in the one EndNote library rather than create multiple libraries, but make sure that they stay in the same location. For instance, if you do move this one over to desktop and you keep this one in documents, sometimes what happens is because they hold hands with each other in the same location, once you move one elsewhere and one in another location, it sometimes will corrupt your EndNote library. These need to stay together. So whenever you do need to move these, if you do, make sure that you move them together. Don't split them up. They hold hands. So in going back to my EndNote library, we have the start of our EndNote library here, and we might want to actually look at how we customize our layout. So I've just maximized this here, and to do so, if I want to customize my layout, I go to the bottom right hand side to this button layout here, and you can see that there's different options on how I can arrange my EndNote library. So I can move this reference panel to the right. I can move it to the bottom split here. I can turn off my groups panel here. So you might have a preference the more you use EndNote, but for the purpose here, this is where you'll do all your kind of organizing and customization of EndNote. And there's a few other ways you can customize it, which we have in the EndNote guide that you can have a look at later. And it's also important at this stage to look at what referencing style that you're using. So up the top here, you can see a range of bibliographic output styles, and the most popular ones will show up here, or a combination will show up here. So I'm doing APA 7th, but you might be using Chicago or a different referencing style chosen by your unit coordinator, but APA 7th is the one I want. And it's important to make sure you start this off at the start, because otherwise you might forget about this little box. You'll start doing your work, referencing, and what will happen is it might show up as a different referencing style, which is not what you wanted. So you want to get that one set at the start, and as you start to populate references, they will start to appear here. So before I move on to the next section, I would have told you a little bit about what EndNote is, some tips on making sure that you get it started correctly, but also how you can customize. But I'm going to take a short pause and let my co-presenter Kelly see if there's any chat questions to be answered. Kelly, do we have any questions?
Tamara, nothing at this stage, so I'm assuming that everyone can hear us. If you're having any trouble, just drop something into the chat box, and if you have any questions along the way, you can pop them in there and we'll answer them at the end of each section. So I think if there's no questions right now, we're good to carry on.
Perfect. Okay, so next part, we're going to look at how do we actually get started in adding these references into EndNote. Because it's empty at the moment, we want to start knowing how we can actually put things in here. So I'm going to look first at how I can actually export references into what's that, library search. So if I go into the library homepage here, you can see I've pulled up the main library homepage, and I'm going to put in marine mammals as a search to get started. So there are actually two ways on the library search page which you can actually add references into EndNote, and you can add them either individually or you can add them as a group. So we're going to take a look at how we can add these two different types. So to add a single reference, what I've done is I've pulled up my search. I'm going to narrow it down to journal articles here. And what I want to do is add a single reference. So I want to be adding this one to my EndNote library. And what I want to do now is look for these 3 dots. These 3 dots usually are kind of a signifier of more actions. And if I click on here, you can see that it'll give a few different options. These are all other referencing citation software management systems. EndNote is the one that we use. We don't use the other ones here at Murdoch. And I've just clicked is EndNote. So I've just gone to 3 dots, selected EndNote, and what's happened is down the bottom here you can see it's saved a little file. So that's how you would add a single reference. I'm now going to look at how I can add a few different ones rather than a single reference. So to add a group of references, what I'm doing this time is rather than going to the ... I'm actually clicking this folder picture. So I'm clicking save, and as I'm clicking save, you'll notice at the top right hand side, these are now going into a folder. So I'm saving about 3. And if I go to the top right hand side here, I click on saved items. And this is how I'm going to be adding a group of items. So I've clicked on the folder now, and you can see my 3 references here. And I'm going to click export to EndNote again. So what's happening is it has a link and it saves another one down the bottom here. So in either case, an RIS file is downloaded. So you notice this RIS. So this is the type of format that EndNote references are saved as, and this is just what they're called. And to complete importing these now into your EndNote, you open the RIS file. So I'm clicking here, and you can see here I've just 3 references in, and I'm going to add that single reference in there as well. And you can see I'm starting to populate my library. So as I import a reference, they do show up here, and all my references will show up here. So now I've gotten a start to my EndNote library. And note that in the imported references area, it's only a temporary holding space. And as soon as you either import more references or close the program, these will disappear. So they all go into all references, which will then stay in your EndNote library. It's also a good point that once you do add these in, this is a perfect time for you to check your reference for errors. So to do so, I'm going to click this. So I'm going to be checking the reference for any errors. And to do so, I select this, and then I can go into the referencing details here. So this is kind of data that makes up the reference, and you can see it's put the title in, the journal that it comes from, and oh, no bibliographic is initialized. How weird. So usually what will happen is a preview will show up here. So not sure why it's not working today. Maybe it's probably because I haven't downloaded my APA 7 properly. So for this purpose, I'm going to just keep it as APA 6. And you can see the preview shows up here. So say if, for instance, I can see ... and I wanted to clean that up and I'm checking my reference, I go into reference here and you can see it's done the ... because there's heaps of authors here. And if there was an error, maybe I wanted to take this out of the title, what will happen is this will then go into the preview and tidy it once it's a bit saved. So what will happen is, to save that, I've done an edit here, and then I've just clicked another reference to save the references. Yep. And what's happened now is it's updated that reference and shown it in the preview, about it in brackets. So that is how you put it, export your references from Library Search into EndNote. I'm now going to have a little look at how to directly import through a database. So the library has lots of databases, but for most of them, a lot of them will export directly into EndNote, not all of them. but a lot of the time if you do export and use databases, this is sometimes a really good way to add references into your EndNote, because a lot of the metadata seems to be a bit better quality through EndNote. So a few ones will give you the option of exporting into EndNote. So this includes PubMed, CINAHL, Science Direct. But really, rule of thumb, when you want to see if a database actually imports things to exports your references into EndNote, you're looking for words like export, cite, save, and RIS format. That's how you can kind of find out whether they integrate nicely with EndNote. So for this example, I'm going to be doing Scopus as the database example. So as it loads, I'm going to do a similar search to what I did in library search, marine mammals, just because it's quite easy. And I do a bit of a search. What I'm looking for now is those keywords: export, cite, save, or RIS file. And for the purpose of this, you can see export. So if I put this one into EndNote, you can notice as I click the box, this will pop up, export is available now. So I'm clicking export. I'll get this little dialog box that'll pop up. I'm selecting RIS format because this is the format that EndNote uses. And then it will ask me what information I want to export into EndNote. So I'm going to be clicking these ones. And then I select, and it downloads down the bottom, very similar to how we did it with library search. Once again, has a bit of a think, and it adds it in here. You can see the reference and the preview. So now that I've started having nice library, I'm going to take a look, how do I now do this in Google Scholar? So once again, marine mammals, it's my favorite search. And I've clicked search and I've pulled up Google Scholar. So there are actually two ways of setting this one up. So what you can do is similar to the ... I want to go to the lines up the top for more information. And what I'm doing is I'm going into the settings to make sure that in the bibliography manager, I can actually set it up to show links to import citations into EndNote. So if you've never gone into this section before, it might show up as in this bibliography manager here. It might say don't show any citation import links, but I want to set it up so EndNote talks to Google Scholar. I'm going to click show links to import citations into EndNote, which is the one we want, and I'm saving those settings here. So the next one is, now that I've set that up, you'll notice that this little button, import into EndNote, is automatically put into the plugin here, which is a way of getting it imported. And another way is similar to export, save, and cite in the databases. These little arrows mean cite, so that's another way we can get this into EndNote. So two ways, this button or this button. So I'm going to click EndNote here, and once again, it is a bit similar, has a bit of a search, and here it is. So now I've got a nice library full of a different combination of references. So another note, if you are using a Mac, most Mac things are very similar in EndNote for both Windows and Mac, but Mac uses your exported references rather than the bottom. They're going to appear in a downloads folder. So to do that, you would drag and drop the file into the EndNote icon, but that's for Macs. We can always help those with Macs after the session, but for this purpose, we've now had a look at how we get things into EndNote. So you can see here as I click on my references, you can see here, here's a whole bunch of different previews that we can see to check that our references look correct. So if you do, for instance, have a different referencing style that aren't showing up here, what you can do is select another style here, and you can see here's a whole range of different referencing styles if they're not in the main ones. So say if I wanted to add this one, I would choose, and now I've got that referencing style, but I'm going to go back to APA 6. Cool. So I've had a look at how all the different ways we can add things into EndNote. Kelly, do we have any questions before we look at EndNote and Word?
Thanks, Tamara. Yes, we've got two questions. Deborah's asking, is it exporting the article to EndNote? And second question is, can I export multiple records from Google Scholar?
Yep, so it's not importing the whole article into EndNote. You can see here as I click on the references here, the attached PDF isn't coming in. So these are just the metadata of your, so these are kind of your descriptors or the information that you normally put in a reference. If you wanted to have the whole article in your reference, you would have to attach the PDF and download it in here. So what you would do is you would download the article from here. So you might, these are books, but I want to have this time an article. You would download your article and import it into EndNote. So I would download the PDF, then I would go into the record that I've imported, get that PDF, and this is where I would then find the PDF and attach it and select it there. So for instance, pretend maybe this is the PDF, then open it, and that should attach the reference there. And there's some steps and information on how to do that one in the EndNote guide. So adding, the next question was about adding a group in.
Multiple records from Google Scholar.
Yep. So to go into Google Scholar, let me have a little look. I haven't added a group in before. There might be a way to do so, but I don't think so. It doesn't look like it.
No.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it has that function. It looks like Library Search does and the databases do, but I don't think Google Scholar does, or not in an obvious way.
Star on the left of those icons below each of the references. See that star? I think that adds it to your My Library, which you can see in the top right, just below your picture. I don't know if doing it that way gives
possibly. Yeah, but I mean, that's a good question. Export. Yeah, it looks like it. So that's the way. Just found out something new. Cool. So yeah, it's the star. It looks like it's the star. Yeah, cool. Easy. So, okay, is there any other questions before I take a look at Word?
Nothing so far, so I think we are good to go.
Awesome. Okay, so now that we've started having a whole library, the next step is, okay, well, how do I get this attached and exporting it into my assignment? So I've actually pulled up a Word document here as a bit of an example, and when you actually install EndNote onto your computer, it will actually also install a plugin that will connect into Word called Cite While You Write. So what happens is this plugin will allow you to add citations and create bibliographies on your reference list. So it'll integrate into EndNote. And you can see now that I've downloaded EndNote, you can see this is the plugin on the top ribbon. This is the Cite While You Write ribbon. So before I start adding things in, one important note is I need to just double check that the referencing style matches the referencing style that is in the EndNote program, which is opened up at the same time. So you can see here in EndNote, I've got APA 6. If I go into Word, it has APA 7th. I need to make sure that these two match, because what happens is don't match, and I don't pay attention to this at the start, what will happen is my references will come out looking a bit jumbled and crazy. So what happens is Word will talk directly to EndNote, the program, and if you've got two different referencing styles, there's a possible corruption that might happen. And sometimes at the library we get contacted by people who have used EndNote for a long time. What's happened is all of a sudden they come to us because everything's looking a bit crazy, and one of the common kind of issues is that they've put in, they've made sure that these are two different styles and we need them to match, because otherwise it's not going to work properly. So I've just double checked to see if the styles match. So I have APA 6 here and I've got APA 6 here, so that's good. And now I'm going to look at how I'm going to add in an in-text citation into my Word document. So this is my assignment. I want to be adding in a EndNote reference. So to do so, what I would be doing is finding the reference in EndNote that I want to be adding in. So I want to cite this one. So what I'm doing is I'm selecting it here. So I've just clicked and highlighted it. Going back into Word, I'm going to find where I want to be putting in my citation. So I might want to put it here. And what I do is up the top, you can see here's where I can insert citation, and it's got a little drop down. And I'm clicking selected citation because it's going to talk to the one that's selected in EndNote and add it in. What's happened is I've clicked selected citation, and you can see now it's cited it, and it's also added that reference down the bottom, which is what I wanted. So that looks really good. So depending on your referencing style, you'll need to add the citation in either author date or footnote format. So this tutorial today, we're only going to look at author format, but further information, if you do footnote style, that can be found in our EndNote guide under extra information. So we've just added in this, this citation. It looks good. And one thing to note is also when you look at the citations, when I click on it, it highlights the whole citation as a group. When I click here, it allows me to kind of click anywhere. But when I click here, it's putting it as a group. So what's happened is this plugin is not like your usual text in a Word document. It's actually grouping it together. It all needs to stick together. So if, say, I didn't like the look of treasure or there was a spelling error in treasure, one issue I could have is I'd go, oh, treasure's misspelled. I want to go and edit it and fix it up. Instead of updating it like I would in a Word document here, if I deleted it, it's not so easy in Word because what's happened is it's all grouped together. If I needed to update this, it could possibly break this whole link and corrupt it for further issue down the track. So there's a whole certain way that you need to edit your citation, and to do it, don't edit it directly like I just did down here, because what will happen is issues later down the track. So if we need to make changes, how do we do it? So to edit a citation, what we can do is we can select and highlight the reference, and then I go up to the top to edit and manage citations, and a box will show up here, and this will allow me to edit a citation perhaps in excluding the author or the year, depending on if this is the way you want to edit your citation. So I'm going to exclude author this time round, and it's nicely kind of tidied that up. Say if I wanted to edit the citation in a different way, or there is that spelling error I mentioned before, how would I do that? In the edit and manage citation, it doesn't really have that as an option. So to do that, the best way to do it is to go directly into your EndNote program, and you would go into the file here, and in this referencing area is where you would be editing that. That is going to make sure that when you have the reference and you've edited it, it's going to update those changes once I've kind of added it maybe in here. I'm just going to add in the word cake, pretend that that was the addition I wanted to put in to my reference. Once again, clicking out to save it. And it's now saved it here. And what I'm doing is it's not coming through here because we've already added in the reference. But what I want to now do, and I'm hoping I've selected the right reference to tidy up, and this kind of relates to the next point I'm going to look at, is if I wanted to save this update, I have to delete this citation and then add it back in again with the correct, the correct edition. The thing is, similar to editing it, I can't just directly edit it. I need to cleanly remove it from my EndNote Word document. So how do I do that? So to delete a citation, I would either highlight it here or highlight it here. It doesn't matter which one, but I'm going to remove this. It'll also remove the citation. To do so, I go to Edit and Manage Citations again. It wasn't in the drop-down before, but up the top, I want to remove the citation. This removes it cleanly and stops it from having any corruption errors. I've just removed it, and I'm not going to have any issues down the track if I edit it directly. And once again, I'm going to add that selected citation in with the correction. Inserts corrected. And you can see down the bottom, here's my edit that I made, cake. I put that in. So as I mentioned, we've just looked at how we can add in citations into Word, but also being careful about how we edit and delete and making sure they're all grouped together. Is there any other questions before we go on to EndNote support?
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions. First one from Sienna is, can't you just click on Update Citations instead of removing and re-adding?
Oh, I'm not too sure. I haven't used this in a while. I think so, yes. I think you can update your citations to also do that, and it should filter through the rest of the document. The reason I did it in the other way was because I wanted to also show how I deleted the citation and then re-added it. So you can also update your citations that way, and it should apply the updates throughout the whole document. But yes, it is making sure that I've updated it in here, the main area of EndNote, and then those changes should filter through the rest of the document.
Yep, good. So that's an alternative. And the next question from Deborah is, how do you add the page number to an in-text reference?
Yep. So if I wanted to add the in-text page number here, what I do is I highlight this here, and similar to before, I'm going Edit and Manage Citations. And in here is where I can actually add in pages. So I want to add in my page 23 because that's what I want to be adding in. And when I add in the number 23, you can see it's automatically now said page 23. So that's how you would do it. You'd go into Edit, Manage Citations, and add your pages in here. And you can also adapt the prefix and suffix and all those other things.
Good. That's all the questions we've got so far. So I think we are ready to go on.
Cool. So now I'm going to take a look at what EndNote support is. So you would have noticed that during the session, it was a very, very big overview, very simple, very basic, and you would have found out there's also all these other different ways you can use EndNote throughout the session. But we do actually have a whole comprehensive amount of information in our EndNote subject guide. We could cover every single thing about EndNote in our session, but that would last hours and hours and hours. And really, you just want to know what EndNote is and get started with it and understand roughly how it works and some of the pitfalls. So our EndNote guide actually has a lot of great information in it, and actually shows, and it's broken down everything in. You can manually enter something into EndNote as well. You can add full text, instructions on how to add the full text PDFs, managing your library, all this sort of stuff. And we're going to be loading our recordings into this tab at the end of the session as well. You can also contact, because it might be this is the guide, it shows you all the information that you need to know with EndNote, but we actually also have our librarians who can also help you out with EndNote as well. So if you do have any troubleshooting issues at some stage, you might come up, you might be confused about something, or you want to sit down with someone and have that help. To get that help, we can go to help and support, and our librarian team can actually help you as well. So if we go ask our librarians here, you can actually find out which librarian is in your area, and you can either ask a question about EndNote through here or book an appointment through one of these areas here with the relevant subject librarian. And that's how you can get some personalized one-on-one help if you need it. But yeah, I think that's really the quick kind of look at EndNote today. And thank you for coming to the session. So we might wrap it up and stop recording now. So